Hey everybody, my name is Johnny and I like to talk about games. Today we're talking about my top 5 games for the year that I'm really excited about. Let's get into it. Coming up at number 5 on the list, we have Forspoken, which I needed to write down because the name is so bad. I couldn't keep it in my head for even the length of this recording. But it looks like an interesting, almost like isekai type of setup where the protagonist is ported into a different world, and all of a sudden you're doing parkour, magic, and all of this stuff. It looked kind of interesting from a visual standpoint, although I wasn't really sold on the parkour aspect. So this is why it's kind of low on the list. It still looks interesting. I'm still probably gonna play it, but there's something about it that didn't quite jive with me. So I'm still cautiously optimistic that this could be a great game to experience, especially in the fall or holiday season, where something a bit more magical is always nice to do. Sliding into number 4, we have Gotham Knights, which you may be surprised that I picked as a top 4 here, but I actually like Batman a lot, even though he's not in the game, right? The whole premise is that Gotham Knights are replacing Batman after he's kind of gone from the scene for whatever reason, and you're playing these different characters. Each of them have their own skill set and skill trees that you can level up, and different play styles. This is also drop-in co-op, which compounds my excitement because the idea of jumping in with different friends on this would be a lot of fun, especially with some of my close friends from the podcast, Rajako Carrick. Number 3 is God of War Ragnarok, a game that I think all of us are excited for. I was actually on the boat of not enjoying God of War as much as everybody else, but still, it was a great game. I had a great time with it. There was something about my journey with the game. I don't know if it was because I was streaming it and I was so focused on other aspects, like just trying to make the best show possible, right? That I actually didn't enjoy the game as much. You know, when I was at the end of it, I kind of wanted to be done with it for some reason. I don't know if it's the close camera angle. It just felt a little bit uncomfortable, actually, in terms of gameplay for me. But nonetheless, it was a spectacular story or adventure, right? I'm really excited for the new one. And I would really want to see a few tweaks and improvements here and there, whether it's the camera angle or some other practical issues with using your companion to interact with the scenery not always working out for me and this type of thing. The other thing that was really noticeable from the other game was using the joystick as skills didn't really work for me. I actually hated having to click the joystick for really important skills. I don't think that input works as well for stuff that you're gonna be using a lot. I don't mind it if, you just click in to sprint or something like that, but if it's something that you have to use on a repeated basis, I would just much rather have a combination of buttons. Maybe that's just a personal preference. Let me know in the comments if you also kind of struggle or dislike this type of input where you're having to press the joysticks a lot. Outside of that, I would love to see a time skip so that Atreus isn't the small kid he was in the first game, and I would love to get some more variety instead of just boy all the time, right? Maybe some development in the relationship between the two. I would love that. Some new characters would be interesting as well, and a sense that the world around them is a little bit different too. Some stuff has taken place, and it's not just picking up where we left off on the last one. Now for my top 2 game that I'm excited for, this one will probably surprise you, or at least I know a lot of you don't have this in your radar, but Kerbal Space Program 2 is a game that I'm massively excited for, and I've been looking for this ever since I played the original game, and they talked about doing a sequel with more involved graphical presentation and all this. For me, my experience with Kerbal Space Program was so compelling. I had this own narrative that I was developing, nothing to do really with the campaign or anything like that. I wanted to create this amazing intergalactic travel station. So it was like a space station, but it had the ability to also travel between planets. And this was actually the first playthrough that I did on YouTube. I got started doing Let's Plays, and this was the first Let's Play that I did. So it has a special place in my memory. And my experience with the game was so unique and so creative, having to find solutions to problems the whole time, doing stuff that looks cool but then also works, and learning all the stuff about trajectories and the apoapsis, so the highest point of your trajectory, learning how to manipulate trajectories and how to plot stuff. So interesting, so alien to anything I had done until then. I had no idea about any of that rocketry stuff. Very cool to get into, a game that really doesn't hold your hand and forces you to try and fail until you get something that works. You get a design that works and then stick with that and build on top of it. Oh, Basil is here to say hi. Hello, everybody. Yeah. I really want to see what they can do with a more detailed graphical presentation and a larger variety of craft and elements that you can have. Maybe even base building and planets. Dude, it has me absolutely stoked. And then finally, number 1 on my list of games that I'm most excited for this year. And this one, I'm not sure will come out this year, but for now, it is confirmed for 2022. Final Fantasy 16. Now, you may not know this about me. I don't ever mention it, but I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan. I've played every Final Fantasy game almost since Final Fantasy 7. I skipped 8 and 11, but I've loved those titles. And I've kind of evolved alongside them. You know, you start with the very turn-based, kind of slow-paced ones, and really you get to what is an evolution, and now we're at kind of real-time action-based, and I'm along for the journey. I've really enjoyed the recent 15 and Final Fantasy 7 remake style of gameplay with the real-time, you know, action-packed. I'm on board for another full title with that style of gameplay. And the idea of a full-fledged Final Fantasy experience with a, you know, a different world setting and everything, a different gang, the camaraderie that's always present in those games. I just love that, you know, beautiful music, right? Which we always get in those games. It just, to me, is always a special experience to play a new Final Fantasy. I've liked some more than others. For me, 13 wasn't that great. It didn't really stick with me, none of the characters or the music particularly. But I love those games. And the music has been a part of my life since childhood. I've listened to those OSTs just over and over every week of my life, at least once, right? They've just always been around for me. They're such a big part of who I am, really, and they've been such a big influence and a part of my life that another full-fledged, like I say, Final Fantasy title really excites me. I really want to see how they tweak stuff. Based on the recent success of Final Fantasy VII Remake, do they adopt that gameplay fully? Do they try to do something a little different? Personally, I would love to see them lean a bit more into magic. It kind of felt like physical attacks and that type of thing had a more prominent role in the games recently. I would love to see some really cool magic system come in and rock the boat a little bit. I feel like every new Final Fantasy needs to shake the status quo a little, and just a repetition of Final Fantasy 15 would be slightly disappointing to me. I would like to see a slightly different gameplay style. It would still be action-based for my taste, but I would absolutely love to see a cool materia system like we kind of had with Final Fantasy VII, brought back a little bit, where, you know, customizing your magic and all that has a more prominent space in the game, and thinking a bit more tactically about what magics you're using. The one thing that I don't love in those games is the analyze. You always, you know, have to analyze the enemy to learn from them. This is something that I think there's room for improvement. I would love for it to be a bit more intuitive, right? the ability to look at an enemy and kind of surmise what they will be weak to. And this is something you see in Horizon. We recently played on the channel. By the way, shout out to our Twitch streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday on Twitch. You can check it out in the links in the description. We played Horizon Forbidden West, and you could really tell just by looking at the enemies what they were going to be weak to, right? Different parts, you know, maybe it had like an electricity thing going. You would know that if you hit it with electricity, it would pop. So a combination of streamlining the information gathering, making that more intuitive and simple, with a more complex and interesting magic system, I think would be the key for a more interesting game overall. Basil, get down. But I want to hear from you. What do you want from a Final Fantasy game? Do you want them to go back to the turn-based? Are you a hardcore fan of the older games and you want that style back? Are you embracing the full-on real-time action system? Let me know. And now, for the little extra, a couple titles that didn't make the list, but I'm also very excited for, and I believe may or will come out in 2022. First one, Stray. Of course, the cat game needed to be featured here. And you're playing as a cat and exploring a cyberpunk world. I'm sold at the get-go, right? You had me at playing as a cat. But jokes aside, I'm really excited for it. It's published by Annapurna Studios, which has done many good games as well. And it could be a really cool, laid-back, but engaging sort of walking simulator. It looks like a walking simulator, but you're a cat kind of deal. I'm okay with that. I think it would be interesting to explore the world through the lens of a cat, because the nature of what you can interact with or do is much more limited, or at least very different as a cat. So that could provide an interesting filter to look at things through. Next up, we have A Plague Tale Requiem, which may come out this year. I'm not convinced that it will, but if it does, that's a game that really garners a lot of attention. The first one was a big surprise, I think, for many of us in how well it did, how polished it was. I still remember the haunting strings in the music. The OST had these like hauntingly powerful string tracks that really sedimented the feel of the world. And even though I didn't love the kind of sneaking around gameplay as much, overall as a game, that was insanely good. And to wrap it up, we have to mention Hellblade 2. Hellblade 1 was one of my first Let's Plays that I did on my YouTube channel as well. So again, I have some special love for that. But that game was a hell of a journey too. You know, following Senua's journey and experiencing the soundscape as she would with her kind of mental illness or mental issues was just so powerful to me. And the real struggle, you know, of getting through those waves of bad guys in the end, and then you get to the end and that theme pops. I still get goosebumps to this day with just that music theme popping at the end and the way everything came to a close. If you are still here, let's use the secret code that only people who stick around until the end know. #closers. And I really want to thank you helping improve this channel with your thoughts, criticisms, and feedback in the comments. It really does help, and it goes a long way to building what we're trying to do here. And as always, I hope to see you over on Twitch, where we can have longer form conversations and a bit more back and forth. That's it. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.